Chapter 3. Insisted upon by all the eminent theurgists of past time as being of equal importance with practical work, and as a radical necessity, giving precedence to that work, the august philosophy which underlies the theory and technique of magic is a prerequisite to any further discussion. Indeed, there can hardly be a real understanding of the rationale of magic, and certainly no realization of the complexities taking place within and without the constitution of the magician. If the cornerstone of philosophy is not firmly laid in his mind, if there is danger in the pursuit of magic, that danger only arises where the operator has no precise knowledge of what it is that he is doing. It is upon an intelligent understanding of the meaning of the occult symbols and the realities that they are primarily intended to convey that the efficacy of the rites largely depends. The symbols and the appurtenances of magic in the profane hands of one not acquainted with the foundations of the art will most assuredly fail to produce the proper thaumaturgic results. The mere intellectual familiarity with these arcane principles, however, is of little avail if there is no spiritual experience. On the other hand, magical investigation of the universe and its consequential spiritual realization in consciousness assumes a greater dignity and a richer implication and profundity when well buttressed by a theoretical understanding. In his recent work, The Mysteries of Egypt, Lewis Spence affirmed that the philosophical system of magic gathered up and made manifest all the wisdom and arcane knowledge of the ancient world, which was thus crystallized and systematized in such a manner that had it been preserved in an unadulterated form would most assuredly have saved later ages from many religious catastrophes and much false mysticism. But through the supineness and neglect of its conservators, and perhaps through the cynical influences which impinged on them from abroad, its early divine beauty was gradually lost until at last only the skeletal forms of its ritual and ceremony remained. It was in the orthodox exoteric religions that some of the several scattered fragments of the magical skeleton were retained. Unefficacious in the main, and incomprehensible to most by reason of unscrupulous tampering. But the essence of magic, its early divine beauty, has been preserved by the unselfish hands and cherished in lofty minds, and if much care can be exercised, can be gleaned even in published books. In the Gnostic works, included within the Neoplatonic writings, in the willful obscurities of the alchemists, among the literatures emanating from the Rosicrucians, in all of these we may find luminous vestiges of the philosophy and practice of that magic of light, which pieced carefully together upon the synthetic foundation provided by the tree of life, form a sublime and workable system, bestowing the radiance of understanding on whomsoever will see. The principal ingredients of the magical system are the source of reference, which is the tree of life of the Kabbalists, and the hieratic religion of the sacerdotal caste of Egypt. There is, I might mention, leaving the reader to interpret as he will, the legend that the Kabbalah was received by Moses as a sacred trust on Sinai, and that he handed it down to Joshua, who delivered it to the judges, and they to the Sanhedrin, until finally it was seized upon and elaborated by the Tanaim and the later Kabbalistic rabbis. Other people firmly maintained that if ever such a person as Moses existed, historically, and if the Kabbalah and its corollaries emanated from him, then he obtained it from the Egyptian priests with whom he indubitably studied in the Nile temples. Few other countries in the world, except India perhaps, can boast of so eloquent a chronicle of mystic and magical tradition as Egypt, which rightly has been styled the mother of magic. Whether or not the Kabbalah is actually derived from the Egyptians or any other people is a moot point, and despite legend and fanciful speculation, there is no authenticated historical evidence of any substance in this direction. Yet the practical theurgy of the Egyptians harmonizes remarkably well with the philosophical theories of the Kabbalah, and the experience of a multitude of magicians tends to the belief that there could hardly be a more suitable or satisfactory combination. Hence, a presentation of the underlying principles of the universe as conceived by the magicians and a study of which must form the basis of all practical works will here be given. This conception of the universe will be briefly stated in the philosophical terms of the Kabbalah and woven around the central structure of the Tree of Life. On penetrating into the sanctuary of the Kabbalah, one is seized with admiration at the sight of a doctrine so simple and at the same time so absolute. The necessary union of ideas and signs, the consecration of the most fundamental realities by primitive characters, the trinity of words, letters, and numbers, a philosophy simple as the alphabet, profound and infinite as the logos, theorems more luminous and complete than those of Pythagoras, a theology which may be epitomized by counting on the fingers, an infinity which can be held in the hollow of an infant's hand, 10 numerals and 21 letters, a triangle, a square, and a circle. Such are the elements of the Kabbalah. Such are the primary principles of the written word, shadow of the spoken logos, which created the world. So thought Levi, and in truth one must wholeheartedly agree with him. For the admiration-compelling foundation of the Kabbalah is a simple mathematical structure of symbols and numbers and names, utilizing 10 numbers and the letters of the alphabet of the angels, as the Hebrew alphabet has been named. Mathematics has forever been considered a divine science by the votaries of the esoteric philosophy, particularly among the Pythagoreans, adumbrating as it does by means of number the creative process both of the universe and the development of the human being. It was the view of several magicians that by the ideas expressed in number was nature conceived in the bosom of infinite space. From these ideas or universals issued the primordial elements, the immense cycles of time, the cosmic bodies, and all the host of heavenly changes. Since numbers were the means or the symbol by which the meaning of the abstract universal ideas could be grasped, in the course of time they came to be substituted for the ideas themselves. The number philosophers were taught at the beginning of their studies to think of growth and development in terms of numbers, to consider cosmic realities in their progressive states as the sequence of numerical advance. To these various states, numbers became identified. Hence, in the magical philosophy, to refer to zero, for instance, is to imply primarily the unmanifest essence of the universe before yet the worlds had come to birth, the boundlessness and immutability of infinite space in which were neither stars nor suns, planets nor men. The circle, a zero in shape, was thus considered to be a fitting representation of that primordial reality which had given existence to all living things and beings in the vast expanses of space. The point, metaphysical and spiritual, which appears in strict accordance with cyclic law, was represented by a dash or a line, extending from top to bottom of the circle, an upright figure 1. The number itself then came to indicate the process of the germination of the worlds, each number by virtue of the evolutionary process to which it originally applied accordingly stood for the process itself. We have in consequence the rationale of the geometrical figures and sigillae and symbols employed in magical ceremonies. As the philosophy of the Kabbalah is unfolded, the reader will see what are the fundamental implications at the root of the signs and symbols which Theurgy uses, and it will be clearly perceived that no longer are they arbitrary signs of dubious connotation, but stern realities invested with an august truth. I must beg of the student, however, to bear patiently with me for a while in this and subsequent chapters, since I am dealing with a highly complex and difficult subject. No matter how fine a simplification is provided for general study, always must it call for close attention and much application. First of all, the philosophy of the Kabbalah is the philosophy of evolution. The universe, with all its planets and worlds and independent beings, was conceived to be the emanation from a primeval substance principle, which some have called God, the Absolute, the Infinite, the All, and so forth. In the Kabbalah, this principle, which is the one reality, is named Ein Sof, the Infinite. The Sefer HaZohar, the most important, perhaps, of all Kabbalistic texts, conceives it to be unchangeable, unknowable to the mind, illimitable, unmanifest, and absolute, beyond all intellectual comprehension in itself, inasmuch as it could never be grasped by a mentality which is but a segment of its all-inclusiveness. It is stated to be Ein, nothing, since it does surpass all finite understanding, immutable and boundless as its expanses are to the human mind, whose most profound speculation could not approach to the faintest adumbration of what it is in itself. It must ever remain a mysterious emptiness, no thing. In this connection, the graphic conception of the early Egyptians is very forceful as well as picturesque. The sky, or space, anterior to all manifestation, was conceived as the naked body of the goddess Nui, the queen of infinite space, and from her breasts the milk of the stars, the primordial waters of substance, were portrayed as issuing forth. All that can be said with truth of this absolute and supreme reality is that it is. This must suffice. Omnipresent, eternal, and self-existent, these are ideas which transcend even the loftiest flights of the trained imagination, abstractions beyond the grasp of mortal minds. One of the symbols of this potentiality of the Ein during a period of quiescence is a circle, signifying that all having been withdrawn into homogeneity, motion returns perpetually into itself. As in the glyph, the snake's tail returns into and is swallowed by the head. The circle is only broken, so to speak, by the law of periodicity. This law, affecting all and inhering in the very nature of things, governs the constant flux and reflux, appearance and disappearance of the worlds. The potentiality of the Ein Sof is only mirrored forth with the outgoing from itself of the breath of creativity, with the commencement of a cycle when the one life is polarized into spirit and matter. The breaking of the circle of unceasing motion is accomplished by a contraction of its infinite light, by a positing of a minute point of scintillating refulgence within the confines of space. How this concentration of light into a cosmic center was effected, what its obscure origin, we are unable to tell. There are confused explanations concerning the will of Ein Sof or the laws of cycles, but they do not really tend to intelligent satisfaction. In the one case, it is completely impossible to conceive of so infinite and so abstract a spiritual condition as Ein Sof possessing a will which can be put into operation, any more than that it possesses a mind or a body. The philosophic tradition is that Ein Sof is not spirit or will, but the underlying cause of both, not force or matter, but that which underlies them, their ultimate cause. In the second case, this postulate of the cyclic law to account for the appearance of the center of lights bespeaks of something independent of or imposing necessity upon Ein Sof. If the cyclic law is identified with the absolute, the postulate becomes identical with the will to manifest. In any event, since we are agreed in Theurgy that reason cannot be the final arbiter so far as concerns this and similar metaphysical questions, the philosophical tradition must simply be accepted in its bald statement without endeavoring to provide rational explanations for a cosmic center of radiance appearing in space. This cosmic metaphysical center is called Kesser, the crown, and is the first manifestation from the unknown, a concentration of its infinite light. It too, in a certain sense, is unknown, the Zohar naming it the concealed one. Blavatsky regards it as the first logos, unmanifested, for from it both spirit and the root of cosmic matter will yet be born. Its number is 1, for the point in the circle, elongated and drawn as an upright dash, is that number. As the crown surmounting the emanation system, as the apex of the tree of life, which has its roots in the heavens, descending in growth towards the earth, Keser is the deepest sense of selfhood, constituting to the substratum of human consciousness and the ultimate root of substance. This central, sensitive, spiritual point, this metaphysical center or monad of consciousness, fulfills both of these requirements, existing as the real individuality and the ultimate division of matter. From the monad issues duality, two distinct principles of activity permanent throughout an entire period of manifestation, coexistent and co-eternal. These are consciousness and the metaphysical substantive basis on which consciousness ever acts, cosmic root, substance. The one is named Chokmah, wisdom, and to the other is attributed the title of Binah, understanding. To render abstract things somewhat more comprehensible to the minds they were endeavoring to instruct in this metaphysic, one of the characteristics of the Kabbalistic philosophers was to explain so far as is possible their complex and difficult theorems in terms of human conduct and human activity and human emotion. So given to Chakma, we find given the title of the father and to Binah the mother. All the Sephiroths, as these emanations are called, below that name the crown, are given masculine and feminine attributions, and the activity between male and female Sephiroths in reconciliation is a child, so to speak, a neutral Sephiroth, acting in equilibrium. Thus, the tree of life, comprising these 10 emanations, develop from the highest abstraction to the most concrete material in several triads of potencies and spiritual forces, male, female, and child, positive, negative, and their resultant commingling in a third, reconciling factor. These two principles, or Sephiroths, in being entitled the father and the mother, are also attributed to letters of the so-called tetragrammaton, whose 4 letters are YHVH. In connection with this doctrine of the tetragrammaton, I must remind the reader that the attributions of this name and the modes of the exegetical employment are exceedingly important, and insofar as his understanding of them is clear and precise, so will be his insight into practical formulae or magic later to be considered. The father is given the letter Y of this name, and the first H is attributed to the mother. From the union of the Y and the H flow the rest of all created things. In other words, from consciousness and its vehicle are all things formed, and every conceivable being, God or human, divine or animal, has its basis in the Y and the H of the divine name. In passing, it should be mentioned that the attitude adopted by what is known as Christian Science in denying the existence of matter obtains no confirmation in the philosophy of the Theurgists. It is true that the latter claim that the physical world is an illusion, that is, in the sense that its outward forms are constantly changing, that it is in a state of perpetual flux. From this point of view, when looked at from above, the universe is believed to be an illusion, but its existence is grounded In a reality, the root substance of Binah is distinct and separate from the consciousness aspect of Chokmah. In this one respect alone, ignoring several other openings for argument, magic has no interest in or sympathy with Christian science. Both spirit and matter are real, that is to say, during a period of manifestation. In themselves, they are but passing modes of the activity, as it were, of Ein Sof, expanding throughout the entirety of space. Using Binah as an immediate vehicle, the energies of Chokmah give rise to the remaining 7 emanations, which result in the appearance of the tangible physical world. In Chokmah, the ideal or imaginative world plan is formulated by the Logos, who is in Kesser, ideas upon which will be based the world to be. In the Egyptian Book of the Dead, the god Tahuti, or Thoth, the deity attributed to Chokmah, inasmuch as the essential characteristics of both are identical, is there conceived to have been the tongue of the creator Ptah, and he at all times voiced the will of the great god, speaking the words which commanded every being and thing in heaven to come into existence. Sir E. A. Wallace Budge, the distinguished Egyptologist, remarks in the informative British Museum brochure dealing with the Book of the Dead that Thoth framed the laws by which heaven, earth, and all the heavenly bodies are maintained. He ordered the courses of the sun, moon, and stars. This is all in harmonious accord with the nature of Chokmah, the ideation or imagination of the cosmos, in which all things were first conceived and then executed and made manifest in substance. The mother of every form, this is Binah, the third Sephiroth. According to the great 16th century Kabbalist Rabbi Moses, this number is the root of things. Cosmic root, substance, and primordial energy are the terms used by Blavatsky for this particular manifestation, called in the Kabbalah the Great Sea. The shape of the letters of the Hebrew word for sea is a glyph, eloquently indicative of the rise and swell of waves in the bosom of the waters. The ancients very wisely symbolized by sea the untouched virgin substance spread through space. For water is plastic, ever changing in form and assuming the shape of whatever containing vessel it is poured into. Sea is at most adequate symbol of this plastic substance from which all forms are to be made, as well as representing a ceaseless yet passive energy. The color of Binah is said to be black, since black absorbs all other colors, just as all material forms, after numberless transformations and mutations, return to and are absorbed back into the root substance. These 3 emanations are unique in a special way. The crown, with its 2 derivatives, the father and mother, are conceived to be supernal Sephiroths, bearing no relation with the emanations proceeding from them. On the chart of the Tree of Life, the supernals are seen to exist beyond the abyss, that great gulf fixed between the ideal and the actual, separating them from those which are the inferiors, the above from that which is below. Just as waves rise and sink below the normal levels of the water without having any lasting effect on the water themselves, so is considered the relation of the actual universe to the supernal Sephiroths, for the latter lie on a plane altogether removed from anything that we can intellectually comprehend. It is only with the appearance of the 4th emanation that we have anything which is really cognizable by the human mind. For this reason, there is a second method of numbering, additional to that already given. The supernals are thought to be utterly independent of the lower Sephiroths, and while the latter are given birth from and within their own divine essence, the being of supernals is by no means affected. As light shines into the darkness and illuminates it without suffering a diminution of its own existence, so the workings of the supernals overflow from their central being without thereby diminishing in any degree the reality of their source. Hence they exist alone beyond the abyss, although throughout space is their essence diffused, and their numbering is complete in 3. Beginning with the inferiors below the abyss, the plane of conditioned finite existence, the numerations begins once again with the number 1. Thus each Sephiroth in this sense has 2 numbers, indicating a distinct dual development of the life current. Chesed is both number 4 and 1, inasmuch as it is the first Sephiroth on the plane of causality below the abyss. Jupiter, as the father of gods, is sometimes assigned to Kesser in the magical alphabet, but he also pertains to Chesed in another manner, since Chesed on a lower plane is the reflection of the crown. The straightforward numbering is retained to avoid the confusion of 2 different series of numbers, and continues from 1 to 10 without a break. It is only mentioned because this fact alone is able to explain the isolated fragments belonging to the Pythagorean number system, which, when applied to the Tree of Life without remembering the dual numeration, may lead to untold confusion. From the first triad, then a second triad of emanations is reflected or projected below the abyss. They likewise are composed of a male and female potency, which a third Sephiroth produced in direct reconciliation to harmonize and balance their powers. The fourth is named both Chesed, meaning grace, and Gedula, meaning greatness, and to it the ancient philosophers allocated the astrological quality called Jupiter. 4 is a number signifying system and order, these latter being the qualities attributed by astrological tradition to the planet Jupiter. According to some authorities, this is the first number to show the nature of solidity, and since we have seen above that Chesed is the first Sephiroth below the abyss, and is the first of the actual Sephiroths, these remarks obtain justification. The male Sephiroth, Chesed, is symbolical of the potentialities of objectivized nature, and by way of confirmation of the astrological attribution of Jupiter, including also the mythological figure of the tutelary deity by that name. The Pythagoreans called for the greatest miracle, a god after another manner than the triad. The fifth is Gevura, might, and although a feminine emanation in quality, its nature would appear to be highly masculine. Some of the ancients have said that 5 is a symbol of the creative power, and in this concept of creativity and power, we have the character of Gevura. It is a formative force, and its name might, and the planetary attribution of Mars would lead one to imply, by which the plan formulated in the cosmic imagination and projected as an image into the root substance below the abyss in Chesed is whirled into activity and manifestation. 5 is composed of 3 and 2, the former representing the passive energy of the mother, and the latter the wisdom of the father. It expresses not so much a state of things as an act, a further passage, and a transition of ideality into actuality. 6 is the Sephiroth, which is evolved to give harmony and equilibrium to the former forces, and it is named Tiferaz, a Hebrew word meaning beauty and harmony. The number is a symbol of all that is well balanced, harmonious, and of pleasing proportion, and inasmuch as it is the double of 3, reflects again the variegated ideas represented by that number. Since therefore 3 represents the real motivating powers of evolution, the macroprosopus or the logos, likewise in Theurgy, we find a due and equable reflection in a lesser logos, the microprosopus. To this Sephiroth, the Kabbalists attributed the sun, the lord and center of the solar system. By consulting the chart, the reader may perceive that Tiferaz occupies a conspicuous position in the center of the whole structure of the Tree of Life. The Pythagorean number philosophers said that 6 was the symbol of the soul, and the latter we shall discover that in the human being, Tiferaz, the harmonious emanation of the sun, is the Sephiroth of the soul of man, the center of the microcosmic system, and the luminous intermediary between the brooding spirit above and the body with the instincts below. The Zoharic doctors of the divine philosophy allocated the third letter V of the divine name Tiferes, and since the latter is the child of the celestial father and mother, it is called the Sun. The seal of Solomon, the interlaced triangles, a true symbol of equilibrium, is the appropriate token. The process of reflection continues still further, and the second triad, composed of the numbers 4, 5, and 6, though they themselves were projected by the supernal Sephiroth, in turn give rise to a third triad, by reproducing themselves on a yet lower plane. The first of these Sephiroths is male, Netzach, meaning triumph or victory. 7 is conceived to be a complete number, representing a consummation of things, a completion of a cycle, and its return into itself. So in the 7th Sephiroth, beginning a new triad and enclosing the second series of Sephiroths, is summed up anew all the former potencies. Its nature is one of love and the force of attraction, the power of cohesion in the universe, binding one thing to another thing, and acting as the instinctual intelligence among living creatures. The planet Venus, the emblem of love and emotion, is the planet attributed by the magical philosophers to this Sephiroth. Likewise, the color green, which traditionally belongs to Aphrodite, as the forces pertaining to the Sephiroth are peculiarly connected with growth, harvest, and agriculture. In opposition to Netzach, as the second Sephiroth of the third triad is Hod, the splendor or glory, which is a feminine quality, representing the characteristics of Chokmah, although on a plane less exalted and sublime. It represents essentially a mercurial quality of things, ever-flowing, shifting, and in constant flux, and has been termed, I believe, change and stability. With it, possessing a nature very similar, is the ninth Sephiroth, Yesod, the foundation, which is stability in change. Just as the tremendous speed of the electronic particles ensure the stability of the atom, so the fleeting forms and the motion of Yesod constitute the permanence and surety of the physical world. It is the ninth Sephiroth, and hence the ninth digit, comprehending in itself all preceding numbers, commonly termed the astral plane, or the soul of the world. Yesod is that foundation of subtle electromagnetic substance in which all the higher forces are focused and constitute the basis or final model upon which the physical world is built. Yesod is lunar in nature, the moon being the luminary attributed, inasmuch as a curious relationship exists between the Earth's dead satellite and the astral light. It completes the three triads, pendant to which is Malchus, the 10th and final Sephiroth, representing in concrete form, in a complete crystallization visible and tangible to the senses, all the qualities of the preceding planes. The world itself means the kingdom of the physical world, and the scene of the activities and incarnations of the souls exiled from above, the dwelling of the Holy Ghost. In the Zohar, Malchus is given the letter H of the divine name and is called the daughter, being the mundane reflection of the first H, which is the mother. This 10th Sephiroth is called elsewhere the bride, the daughter, and the virgin of the world. Admittedly, this outline gives only a brief and very hasty glance at the numerical system of evolution and cosmic development, which commanded so much of Levi's respect and which elicited from him so bountiful and eloquent an admiration. In this elementary sketch, it will clearly be perceived that numbers relate to creative or evolutionary process, and that fundamentally understood, the nature of number is rhythm. This last statement is important since harmonious proportions and activities do actually guide and mark the first manifestations of the one life into the elements and multitudinous substances present all about one. These differentiations are rightly symbolized by number, which may be conceived to glyph precisely the process of unfoldment. They represent the development of an explicit tangible universe from an implicit intangible essence, from an ideal conception to a completion of the constructed form wherein the ideal finds its earthly habitation. For the theurgist, numbers symbolize the very rhythm of the universe, and with their appropriate sigillae, adumbrate powers and entities with which he seeks to commune. There is another viewpoint of the Tree of Life upon which I should like to touch. It concerns what are called the four worlds. These worlds are metaphysical regions, both of consciousness and matter, for Theurgy holds that each state of consciousness has its own vehicle, an appropriate grade of substance. These worlds may be viewed from two distinct points of analysis, the first of which places a tree in each one of the four worlds, thus yielding us 40 Sephiroths in all. The four worlds are named the archetypal world, where the primordial archetypes or emanations are developed in the form of a tree of life. This archetypal tree of life may be imagined also to represent a human form, which in the Book of Splendor is named Adam Kadmon, the heavenly man, containing within itself all souls, spirits, and intelligences in every part of the cosmos. It is the universal soul, the divine parent and progenitor of all others. This soul it is, this divine man, concerning which Levi speaks, and to which reference was previously made, that soul in the great life of which every individual being and separate consciousness participates. Too numerous are the developments arising from this single postulate, and too numerous are the suggestive ideas which it raises, to enter into at this place. It was my intention, in the first place, to present only a brief outline of the magical philosophy, leaving the reader to fill out for himself the many gaps which have been left open. The totality of the Sephiroths in the Olam Atzilus, the archetypal world, occupies the highest plane of spiritual consciousness, the first appearance of consciousness from the Ein Sof. As the process of evolution proceeds, Adam Kadmon gradually projects itself further into matter, somewhat more dense, its unity being split up apparently, being mirrored in many facets, forming the creative world, Olam Bria. In this world, the plan contained in the creative imagination of the macroprosopus is worked upon still further, the separate sparks or ideas being clothed with that condition of fine substance appropriate to that sphere. Here, too, a complete tree of life is developed through reflection. From the creative world, the tree is projected onto a third plane, the formative world, Olam Yetzirah, where the imaginative ideas of the Logos, the spiritual monadic sparks already clothed in the subtle mental substance of the creative world, are formed into definite, coherent entities, the astral models which give rise to or serve as the stable foundations of the physical world. The physical world, Olam Asya, is the fourth and last plane, and as the crystallized projection of the formative world is the summarization and concrete representation of all the higher worlds. In this conception, we see the justification of the Hermetic axiom, as above, so below, for that which exists below has its ideal archetypal counterpart in the higher worlds. In variegated forms, the archetypal ideas find their particular representation below. Stones, jewels, perfumes, and geometrical forms, all being peculiarly indicative in the mundane sphere of a celestial idea. This metaphysical formula also provides Levi with adequate reason for speaking of the single dogma of magic, that the visible is for us the proportional measure of the invisible. The French Magus also remarks in another place that the visible is the manifestation of the invisible, or in other terms, the perfect Logos is, in things which are appreciable and visible, in exact proportion with those which are inappreciable to our senses and invisible to our eyes. The form bears proportion to the idea, and we know that the innate virtue of things has created words, and that there exists an exact proportion between ideas and words, which are the first forms and articulate realization of ideas. It is this philosophical statement of the relation between ideas and things which give the fundamental rationale of much that holds true in magic. To this we shall have to revert at a later place, there being, in the meanwhile, a few further ideas demanding elaboration. The formula of the Tetragrammaton is also applied to the four worlds and the primordial four elements. To the archetypal world, the letter Y is given. Hence, the archetypal world is the Father, the all-begetter, the all-devourer of the worlds. The Y also represents in this instance the element of fire, showing forth the fierce, active, spiritual nature of the Father. The H, primal, of the Tetragrammaton is allocated to the creative world, to which, being receptive and passive, the element of water pertains. This plane represents the mother, who before the son can be given birth, awaits the creative energy and the influx of divine life from the father. The formative world is assigned to the letter V, the son, and the latter, like the father, is active, male, and energetic. Hence the element air is the attribution. Completing the divine name is the second H, this letter being similar to the mother, passive and inert, receiving whatever influence are poured into her. H is called in the Book of Splendor the King's Palace, and the daughter, representing the physical world, which is the synthesis of all the worlds. The second method is slightly different from the one outlined above. In this instance, a single tree is employed, and the four planes placed on it thuswise. Kesser, the crown, occupying by itself the one plane, is the archetypal world, the realm of the Logos. The second and third Sephiroths, the supernal father and mother, constitute the creative world, receiving and executing the divine imagination. The third plane, or the formative world, the astral plane proper, concerning which more will be said in the following chapter, is comprised of the next six Sephiroths, in which world all is prepared for visible manifestation. Malchus, the kingdom, is the physical world. All the attributions following the first description of the four worlds hold true of this second method, with the exception that I've just noted, that they are arranged on one tree. Before closing this chapter, but one more series of conceptions must be mentioned. From the theurgical point of view, the whole universe is consciousness, life and intelligence embodied in visible and invisible form. Throughout the cosmos there thrills and vibrates one intelligence, one spiritual consciousness, adumbrated in myriads of sparks or monads, permeating every form, and from which nothing in that cosmos is in any wise exempt. Just as there are various grades of mineral, animal, and vegetable life, and innumerable degrees of intelligence among men, so according to the magical traditions, this same hierarchical scale of intelligence exists beyond and above man. Not only does it hold true of our own universe, but elsewhere in the infinitudes of space are other hierarchies of lofty spiritual beings and divine intelligences. From the unknown incomprehensible darkness, which is Ein Sof, there is but one invisible consciousness. Alike in the lowliest dog-faced demon as in the greatest celestial hierarchy, there are hierarchies of consciousness which are celestial, and there are those which are terrestrial, some divine, others demoniac, and still others including the highest gods and universal essences. This is the pivotal center of the whole of the magical philosophy. It is at one and the same time a monotheism and polytheism in a single philosophic system. The whole universe is permeated by one life, and that life in manifestation is represented by hosts of mighty gods, divine beings, cosmic spirits, or intelligences. Call them by what name you will. The spiritual state and diversity ascribable to them is great and tremendous. Among them are those deific forces of the rosy dawn of cosmic manifestation, from whom we are sprung, spiritual sparks thrown downwards from their divine essence. It is now possible to amplify the conception of the tree of life and the four worlds in terms of consciousness. The first manifestation are gods or beings of the highest consciousness, who, issuing forth from the crown, comprise the mind of the Logos, or the immediate administrations of the formulated plan. These beings are the gods, Dayan Kohans, Elohim, Teletarche, whatever name is chosen. The fundamental idea should be firmly grasped, that there are vast hierarchies of beings in space, in an orderly sequential scale of descent from the highest gods in the highest worlds to lesser hierarchies of angelic beings in the lower worlds, is fundamental to this schema. Connected with every Sephiroth and every world which has emanated from the Ein Sof is a certain hierarchy of gods, each having a specific task in the evolution and governance of the universe, and a characteristic nature. Just as Kezer, the crown, produced the other Sephiroths, so do the highest gods evolve from themselves other deities less exalted and less sublime than themselves. Inasmuch as numbers were assigned to the Sephiroths to symbolize creative processes in the cosmos, and since the gods are allocated to the Sephiroths, the gods may also be symbolized by numbers, and the ideas associated with a particular cosmic process can apply equally well to the nature of a given god. Pythagoras has well said that there is a mysterious connection between gods and numbers. As above, so below. All things on earth have their spiritual prototypes, eternal in the heavens, and all beings are the childlike reflection, faint and feeble, of the gods. The more distant, metaphysically and relatively, that any emanation is from its source, the more feeble and faint a reflection is it of that from which it came. The gods or universal essences express more clearly and brilliantly the ineffable spiritual nature of Ein, and in their terrestrial eidolons, the lesser gods, does this limpid brilliance become more veiled and pale and hindered from expression. In man, the shadow of the image of the gods, the brilliance of the Brahmic splendor, in most cases, appears altogether repressed. As heat is to fire, growing less and even less, as it sends out its influence from the flame, so is man to the gods. The further he drifts from them, by so much does he accomplish a self-destruction. This relationship between the order of life and the Sephiroths, between the gods and men and numbers, provides an explanation for the efficacy of the magical symbols and the parts they play in the theurgic rites. The signs and seals are profoundly indicative of inner realities, and each particular symbol is representative of some of the hierarchies of gods and spiritual intelligences. By this doctrine of signatures, each phenomenon is indissolubly connected with an ideal noumenon, the efficacy of Theurgy thus being assured. The object of magic, then, is the return of man to the gods, the uniting of the individual consciousness during life with the greater being of the universal essences, the more embracing consciousness of the gods, who are the everlasting sources of light and life and love. Only thus, to the human being, may there come liberty and illumination and the power to see the beauty and the majesty of life as it really is. By returning in spirit to the sources from which he came, only by reopening himself to them, as a golden flower opens and turns to the sun, to imbibe anxiously and eagerly of its substance and light, so to man may come illumination, and the lifting of the earthly bonds and chains, by the discovery of his own inner God in the first place, and forming an indissoluble relationship with the gods of the universal life. Herein lies the solution to the problems of man and the world. In this nobler consciousness of illumination, devolving from divine union, may be resolved the intricacies of world chaos. The cords which bind men with a strength beyond all mortal chains and fetters may thus be severed. There is no dissolution of these irons other than by the magical knowledge of his own inner self and the gods of all existence. If the essence and perfection of all good are comprehended in the gods, and the first and ancient power of them is with us priests, theurgists, and if by those who similarly adhere to more excellent natures and genuinely obtain a union with them, the beginning and end of all good is earnestly pursued. If this be the case, here the contemplation of truth and the possession of intellectual science are to be found, and the knowledge of the gods is accompanied with the knowledge of ourselves.